Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're having a good day and you haven't been too scared to come out of your homes. I have to ask for a bit of silence. We've got to listen to these guys here. What Jane said is very interesting. I've been working with a blockchain supply chain for about 5 years, and I know my associates here have been doing the same. So what you're going to hear today is some really, really interesting use cases and actually what is actually happening with this technology and how long sometimes it takes to implement it. Just for a bit of clarity, my name is Oliver Oram. I'm the CEO and founder of Chainvine. You're right, it started with wine and it will probably end in wine, hopefully, tonight. Without further ado, I want to introduce you to the panel here. And Geneviève, if you would like to go first, please.
I tried really hard to get it, Geneviève. I'm Geneviève Lavelle. And I am the CEO and founder of AgriLedger, and we are looking at doing a supply chain solution for smallholder farmers, and we are implementing currently in Haiti, doing my favorite fruits, which are mango, pineapple, and avocado.
Yeah. Good evening. My name is Raghavendra, and I represent Bosch, and I'm working in a very special project which is called as Economy of Things, because the lens that we wear as Bosch is at the intersection of IoT and blockchain. So what we believe is that if we were to make things more autonomous, this technology of distributed ledger makes more sense. So making an Internet of Things to an economy of things, or making automated things to autonomous things, is where we think blockchain could be a great asset for us.
Thanks. I'm the mystery guest speaker. So I've known Oliver and Geneviève for quite a while now, and I come at this from a very different perspective. So my name's Richard Mayton. I'm kind of here in my International RegTech Association, so I did a lot of work around the big strategic areas where there's real friction for everybody, I guess, in the supply chain and in the ecosystem. And so a lot of focus around financial crime, fraud, AML, and a real awareness that's a particular problem in trade and trade money laundering. I'm very interested in how blockchain provides a solution to that, and we're seeing the beginnings of that evolving, and the integration of regulators into that with some interesting use cases as well. So I'll be providing a perspective on those aspects.
That's great, thanks. So basically, you've got three very knowledgeable panel guests up here. What I want to do is start with Raghu, if I may. Now, you talk about Bosch. Can you tell us about your experience on implementing real cases into the supply chain and really sort of get that nailed across for the audience?
Sure. So at Bosch, we look at supply chain in two perspectives. One is transport of goods is one way of looking at the supply chain, and the second is in the context of factories of the future, because since we are a large manufacturing company and also a global IoT company, so what we look at is how do we have the factories of the futures which have more autonomous systems. But when you look at supplying of goods, especially where we talk about whether they are the goods into the cold chain, whether the goods with the provenance. So at Bosch, we have been working on multiple areas. So in the factories of future, we are talking about autonomous systems, whether it is an autonomous shuttle, which is going from one machine to another machine and trying to transact in terms of what activities it has done. Those areas is where we kind of look into and also have been working onto it. But on the domains like agriculture, we have been doing a lot of work into it. So we have been working on fresh vegetables and also on fresh fruits. Here the main contribution from Bosch is the convergence of IoT and blockchain, where essentially we talk about the holistic freshness, in the sense from the point where the yield is being harvested to the point where it has been stored till the point where it has been given to the retailer. How do you really have the entire condition monitoring, which is really done in an immutable way, where you could really have a ledger which could talk about the provenance as well as the freshness. We do work on pharma, which essentially is for the cold chain, where you really need to have the transportation of special medicines, which are mainly in the area of personalized medicine and personalized care, because there's a lot of work that's going on. How do you have the IoT intervention onto it? Then finally, when it comes to the foreign trade, which I think with Richard we will also share some use cases, is that we work on provenance of parts in the automotive area, because there's a lot of opaqueness when you look at, not in terms of the counterfeits that we have, of course those are use cases, but when you look at the opaqueness which is essential for the financial reconciliation, you need to have the provenance where you really call a vehicle as a ledger. The moment you have vehicle as a ledger, the entire asset of the supply chain, if it is put onto it, you can do a lot of settlements onto it. So we work on all these three things. Yeah.
Raghu, just one quick question, Fido. So you mentioned quite a lot there, but where exactly are your customers saying, here's the money, show me the money? Where is their business margin in what you're giving them?
So that's where I kind of was preparing for this with GL and Richard. My experience has been is that there are only two areas where today people really want to put their money on. One is where there is a possibility of a business process automation. What I mean here is when there are shared business processes, whether there's a business process which is done by Bosch, which is done by Daimler, which is common and which has been shared, there's definitely a possibility of applying blockchain or a distributed ledger. You can really automate this shared business process without really having a lot of discussions around. So this is one area. The second area that we believe is promising is to provide autonomy for things. Like, for example, how do I have a reputation for a sensor? Like, let's take an example of an electric car and electric charging, or any other sensor which is providing the data. How do you provide a reputation for it so that you can use it for creating an immutable ledger into it? So there are only two things. One is area where you could automate business processes, and second, where you could really automate, the return to it.
Great, thanks, Raghu. And obviously, no need for many introductions here. I've been following AgriLedger for a number of years, and I think it's one of the best cases I've seen in distributed ledgers. So without further ado, Geneviève, would you describe a bit about what you're doing?
Yes, so we're actually a little bit different in that we're looking to really empower the human. And to me, when I looked at the distributed ledger technology and the whole idea of disintermediation, that's where it came into. So in working in agriculture, in the space that we're working with, these people are really, in Haiti, they're part of the bottom 40% of poverty. So therefore, what they have need for are access to market and access to financial services. Through the process, we're enabling them to retain ownership. So now those who normally would have purchased from them are now becoming service providers and are being measured based on that. So using the smart contract, you put in, as a service provider, you agree to certain terms, as a standard operating model, and if you fail to meet those, then the smart contract will be measuring. Obviously, I'm saying one of the concerns I have is the lack of autonomous things such as IoT. But we also have to come into a realization that sometimes these industries are so nascent and do not have the money to invest. So what you have to do is to create first the wealth and then to create more trust. But at least you start creating that knowledge. The other piece that we're bringing, which I think you didn't speak to, is really a disintermediation in the financial services in the payment module. So we actually are looking, when a payment is made, that everyone gets paid at the same time. So we're not only tracing the product, but also tracing the financial obligation. That is providing also data as to what is happening with waste, what is happening with loss, which then can allow you to start now looking everyone as a community as to what needs to be changed to improve the concept. Where also we're, Raghu and I were having a discussion about that. What helps with us is that we're doing it with government and we're doing it with the World Bank. So there is somebody putting the pressure for those participating. But it's almost, I think that eventually it'll make sense because it's kind of like Uber. Taxi drivers, some don't come to the front door to come and pick you up. Now, if you have somebody who you're going to pay, who's going to come and do it, and be there on time, that's something you want to do, and that's where we want to empower the farmers.
I've got a quick question now for you. You're working with a lot of stakeholders. You're working with, you can say, pretty much very poor farmers up to the World Bank up here. How do you manage those stakeholders? I know how difficult it is to get these ecosystems going. Can you describe that?
So in terms of the farmers, what we're doing at the beginning is we're not even touching them except to have a handler in between. So the farmer calls in. I have gone and spoken to the farmers, and we make a mistake. Poor doesn't mean stupid. Poor means not having access, and they understand. Let's not fool ourselves. Today's farmers know that their goods are getting to market, and this is not just a poorholder farmer in India or in Haiti. We are seeing every day in the Netherlands, in Spain, in Ireland, farmers saying, I'm not getting a fair share. So this creates the transparency, not so much the transparency to say, is he not getting the fair share, but why is the price that he's getting versus what the customer is paying, where's the fundamental difference? So now you can start creating transparency in that to look at fixing. So each one is validating. So you're creating to where each one is validating. We are doing, my point of view is almost I want to stay in fresh first because it's kind of like the hot potato. If you want to get it to the end hot and get paid, you just got to keep carrying it. But if you do things like coffee or cocoa, somebody already is usually sitting on things. And you cannot, unless you have a way of mandating that they give the information, you might get, because information to ledger could be a lie if somebody starts messing around with the sensors.
I mean, the old classic, right? Garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly. So it's really an education piece, and it's doing it slowly. I think that this is a great use case. Next ones we want to do is doing more. And what's going to actually talk is the money.
Yeah.
So we're looking at the opportunity with the mango season that's about to start, where you're looking at a farmer which was making less, like let's say collective farmers, were making less than 200,000, which probably will make about 4 million.
It speaks for itself. Brilliant. Richard.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm focused more generally on trying to get more effective alignment between policymakers, regulators, institutions, and the ecosystem to remove risk and friction, right? So for more effective regulatory environments in the big areas that cause that. So financial crime is one of those. Effective credit models is another area of those, and so if you look at trade-based money laundering and sort of estimates, that accounts for 2.2 trillion of financial crime a year, and what those criminals do is they exploit the complexity that you're talking about, right? And they do it in lots of different ways around invoice mismatching intermediaries. And the problem is that 80% of financial institutions' involvement in that is just processing the payments, and they don't have any access to the underlying data. They have no indicators of any type of crime. A lot of the documentation's manual. So what's really interesting is can the ecosystems from the regulators, the agencies and law enforcement agencies use blockchain as just a more efficient mechanism to start to solve some of those as well. And we're seeing some experimentation that's taking place, including the US, where they're looking to, and they did use a DLT-based solution to try and get more transparency, right, around the process, but between importing and export companies, which is where many criminals exploit the lack of information around that. So I think that's a really important value service that you can build on the trade components of your supply chain.
I think there's a common theme really with all of us. I got given a difficult job about 4 years ago of explaining our platform to a group of central bank governors from Africa, and they told me you've got 10 seconds, which is pretty difficult, right? So I basically said to them, look, we're not actually replacing trust, we're reducing the cost of trust. You're the poorest central bankers in the world, yet you pay more for banking than any others. That's quite a wrong system that we have at the moment. What all of the panelists here are saying is essentially, in one way, and one common theme we have is we're reducing the cost of trust and thereby increasing business margins. We live in a world of quite tough regulation and compliance and risk. Now, if we can mitigate some of the costs of compliance and risk, we're doing a good job, and we're pushing the money back down to the people, in the case of AgriLedger, who actually really need that cash. I want to move on because we had a quite heated topic. I had to separate two of the panelists earlier on. I believe this was on...
Wasn't me.
I know, it was terrible. You should have seen it. I've lost... I feel quite shaken. Anyway, it was on data management of all things, and it got quite passionate. So I'm going to put Bosch and AgriLedger here to what they feel about blockchain and what is the perfect case for it in data. And then, Richard, if you want to follow up on the importance of data in compliance.
Yeah, I don't think it was really it's just a point of view. I wouldn't say we totally disagree on a few points, but then I just try to put the Bosch view. We don't own anybody's data, in the sense we do not really want to have anybody's data onto it. That's very clear. But what we think blockchain could do is create a data marketplace which can be used for incentivizing the stakeholders in the right way. In the sense, by the fundamental attribute of the technology and its ability to have a pure decentralized consensus, we feel that data should be leveraged only if in case it can create a marketplace, and that marketplace should be always tied with the incentives. So the reason that I was having a point of view was that, if I were to use a data and a blockchain, I would use only for driving the incentives to everybody in the value chain. Otherwise, it does not have any sense, to leverage blockchain and data. So that was the view, and the example is, what if I scan Alfonso mango in a retail store? How will that data be used? If I am a young father, I have a young child at home, would there be any advice that I would get for nutrition of my child? In the sense, so I would rather use the data for scanning the Alfonso mango to create these data marketplaces where you could really allow other stakeholders who subscribe to this data marketplace and incentivize me for scanning that Alfonso mango,
Don't disagree with this use case, because he didn't talk about that when we were arguing. My point is more sort of like, we are still not talking about the fundamental of to whom the data actually belongs to. And when we talk about, let's say, a smallholder farmer, he's generating more than just a mango. He's generating information such as the time of picking, the quality, how much has been wasted, and the location. That information can become valuable as you start building it. So I think it is behooved on us as providers of a technology which is now creating trust in data, to now also look at, is there opportunity for manufacturing? The same way when a fruit, let's say a mango, is taken and now it's made into dry mango, there is a product which has been created. So as we create the products, what are we doing with the products, and how are we rewarding down in the chain, and how are we incentivizing? So just to also answer your question, what we're looking to do when the customer actually scan, he will get a story about the mango, a story about who's actually taken care of it, and what are the different recipes or opportunities that there is. But more fundamentally is that there are other information that we're going to start being able to provide, such as carbon footprint. How much was actually paid to that farmer? You're paying $5 for it. How much did the farmer get in percentage from that? We don't expect him to get 50%, but we also do not expect him to get 2%. So those are the kind of, and also looking at the loss in the different places. So I think that there is so much that's going to be possible. So we need to actually go in with open eyes and understanding what that data is going to be and to whom it's going to be valuable. Guess what, to whom? The NGOs are going to want their hands on it.
Yeah, I think you raise a good point, especially about that supply chain bit, because what we're seeing is actually there's a lot of ESG data. If you're capturing that data anyway, you can sell it off and spin it off into another module. So that thin stream of data managed by different types of views, you can have a whole host of different people wanting to plug into that data for different reasons. Sorry, Richard, I'll just...
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think also thinking about data as that asset and how do you create value through that data. And so another area again, related to supply chain and trade and trade finances. So one of the challenges we have, right, is that firms in developing markets have very thin credit files. We have government initiatives trying to create repositories of assets, such as invoices, etc. So if we can create richer assets or more effective assets that support their financing needs, right, in order to support those companies and their growth through their trade as well, I think that's a really important role that we can use DLT for as well. So.
You speak a lot to World Bank as well, and I know Agri-Ledger's work. I know, sorry. GL. Can I just do GL, please? Richard, you work a lot, you speak a lot with World Bank, you look at a lot of what SMEs are doing. You've talked about supply chain, trade finance, and there is an area here where you see crime moving in, basically false invoicing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Do you see the distributed ledger technology in some of the cases what Agri-Ledger and Bosch are working on, and also Chainvine is providing information that could be fed up to these compliance and risk units?
It's definitely, looking for it. I mean, Genevieve knows this better than I do, actually. I mean, I've had some conversations. My conversations have been more around how to engage in policy regulators to understand where their strategic areas would be, and SME finance and the sorts of initiatives that you're actually delivering now are great use case example that's important to educate policymakers around the world on as well. But so it's a broader conversation, and it's definitely part of the solution. And I think the issue is it's how do you reimagine the system and the system design as well. And we were talking about this earlier and saying, so disintermediating people who maybe seem to take value out, right? Middle people, right, in the middle, who you think you can create more value through there as well. And just reduce the friction, right, as well. So even on things, Oliver, like just reporting, so duties, imports, export duties, being able to automate that process and bring more speed and efficiency around it.
Where we're going to see actually a big impact, and I'm sure some of you have been hearing, the new frontier is Africa. What people are forgetting is that they just enacted the ATF, which is the African Free Trade Agreement. They ratified it last September. That is going to make a huge difference, because when we look at the intra-Africa trade, currently it's at less than 6%. And effectively, there is markets which are just right next door that they can take care of. So we are going to see a difference of what's happening, and we're going to see them, like I say, I was reading something, Mali has 60% exposure to foreign exchange due to the cotton industry, and they're like maybe 3% of the global market. So when you're starting to look at those kind of things, and guess what? It's not actually going outside to the rest of the world, it's to the rest of Africa. So the next thing that I see coming up probably is some sort of digital currency, which is central bank driven for Africa. And in reality, to be able to create, one of the things that they're going to need to create is trust, and that's why they are looking at things like distributed ledger.
Gotcha. Okay, we've got about 2 minutes left, so if I can get 30 seconds starting with you, Richard, just where do you see us next year, if we all survive the virus, that is?
So at a policy level, I see more effective mechanisms where people are able to learn from real life examples like that, and I think the importance of being able to take those to those decision makers at quite a strategic level, like at a policy and government level, who can provide the sort of support you're getting, right, from a government and a development bank level. I just see the interest in that accelerating. I think it's really important that we see some of the new mechanisms of coordination between governments and development agencies developing to accelerate the development of this.
Raghu?
So I think it is inevitable for any product company to ignore blockchain or distributed ledger. Why do I say is 5 years back, enabling your device to be connected was the strategy. So you need to have your products which are not just connected but have an ability to be enabled with blockchain, because blockchain is going to be, in my view, the future business operating system, where you need to have your interplay of your products getting into it. So definitely you should have blockchain into it, yeah.
I'm waiting for the day where we don't talk about blockchain, but we talk about the project, the issues that we're solving, and the technology is at the end, on the bottom.
Who cares what under the hood if the car gets you to where you're going, right?
Exactly.
Good. So that's about it. Thanks for today, and thank you, all of you. Just don't clap too loud, there's too many. But thanks for listening in today. I know we're in between you and your drinks. Thanks.